Hello, I'm Philip Stoten. I'm at CES 2015 and I'm on the booth of Ford and I'm joined by Eric Wingfield. Eric, thanks for talking to me. We're right here in front of the smart mobility thing. For you guys, smart mobility is about a lot more than cars. I listened to your president and CEO do the keynote. A lot of talk there about the different projects, the different challenges you've got in that area, and kind of how there's an opportunity there to make some changes for the better, which perhaps we don't associate with automotive giants. So tell me how that all works. Tell me what that whole mobility thing means.
Well, we're very excited as a mobility company. We think of ourselves as having a role in the choice of people in moving about in their daily lives. And we think that's a very exciting frame to think about mobility. And as we looked at as the CEO mentioned in his presentation, the choice, or rather the urban environment, the growing information connectivity that we're all experiencing, and of course the pressures that come along with it, such as congestion and then the great opportunity around consumer preference. We started thinking about, if we looked at that through a lens of what is mobility and what is the interest in individuals in moving around, what could we think of as near, mid, and long-term sort of strategies to grow into a view for Ford to have a valuable relationship in society and with customers. And then in 2014 and 2015, we began to look at how could we set concrete experiments that would begin to test against these relative to our strengths, relative to what we think are interesting mobility questions, and then relative to setting an open dialogue. And so these experiments are very much getting to learn that.
And I live in London where congestion's a big issue. In fact, we have to pay for congestion.
Right.
I have a car, but my kids drive it and they don't live in London, so I don't see much of that. And I actually really enjoy using public transport. We have some nice car share options. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and I know you've got experiments happening in Mumbai, in Australia, in Asia, where urbanization is causing these challenges. What's kind of the standout lesson that you've learned in 2014 from these experiments?
I think the thing that stands out for me is that this is a really big playground, so to speak, and that mobility has so many interesting tales that you can really rethink the way you engage in that. So being inside of a car company, I'm very excited about the products that we have. You get to that concrete connection to the vehicles and what that means. But as we started to look at mobility, and as we think of it like this, the piece that stands out for me is that it's such a compelling proposition to be engaged in mobility. It's so exciting to think about local conditions and globally common things that it's very gratifying to be part of it.
Yeah, and it's nice to be able to reach out to all those creative minds, those individual people that know what's going on in their own geography, know what the challenge is, and are coming up with all kinds of different solutions to do that. One of the key things people are talking about here is Internet of Things, Internet of Car, whatever. But for me, it feels like the whole connectivity is a bit of a given now. Everything is going to be connected. It's more about what you do with it, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And I think as you see from within these challenges, when you mentioned, how do we engage in a global discussion? The challenges were very much about setting out, here's a topic, that, and we'll give you a concrete example of a place where it happens. And then we want to hear what you think is an interesting investment. And so the orange area that you see right here is very much about people that developed apps and how they think of what an interesting mobility issue is. And in that particular case, as they develop those solutions, it's just a great opportunity to engage in the creativity that's reinventing or shapes the future much more concretely than people see in their daily lives, where you might hear about intelligent transportation systems, very good, infrastructure intensive, but along the way, people are also making companies that grow into transformative engagements.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is a trend certainly we're seeing in London and other cities is this whole idea of vehicle sharing. The ownership of vehicles has become challenged in some way. It's not as aspirational for kids as it was when perhaps you and I were 18 and we were thinking about our first car. What those changes, what does that mean to Ford?
So we're seeing those trends show up in a number of different ways. And so in places like London or in cities like in the United States, like San Francisco and New York, well, we definitely see a change in the demographic of choosing to drive. But in other places of the world, we're seeing a pent-up desire to engage in personal mobility through vehicle ownership.
Right.
And in the case, we think there's a fit in both places for the shared vehicle, and so user sharing or user, pardon me, I'm looking for a specific usership. Yeah, thank you. Usership models are very much about how is that delivered.
Yeah.
And so we have some of these usership models that are specifically around sharing, and they would be fleet-based. And then we have some that are specifically around individual ownership and how sharing can be an opportunity to make the vehicle available within your own small community.
Yeah.
And we think that is going to be relevant both in terms of what goes into the vehicles, as well as the number of people that have a vehicle made accessible to them for personal mobility.
Yeah.
And there's been quite a bit of discussion about what impact that has for the auto manufacturers. And from our work, and from what we see here, I certainly see good things. It's the opportunity to make mobility available is just really exciting.
So to have this smart mobility, we need to have a smart environment, we need to have smart cities. Do you see governments, both regional, national governments, and kind of the international community getting behind that idea, making these cities connected, making the infrastructure open, available to you to be able to have this smart interaction?
We're fortunate to have, you can still have at the individual and the grassroots level, you can still have that opportunity, but we are seeing city governments and state governments, national governments around the world who are interested in participating at that level as well. And one way that, for instance, we see it out of London or San Francisco is in the open data initiatives,
right,
where publicly available data that is, in a sense, gathered on behalf of the public by governments meant to serve the public are turning that into a valuable asset for the community to make it available to them. And so we see a very strong growth around the world in cities to participate in that kind of environment.
Yeah. Okay, well, Eric, thanks very much for your time. Pleasure to talk to you, and we'll explore some of these projects, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Great. It's a pleasure. Thank you.